My son brought his wife into my apartment. On the very first day she screamed, "I'm the boss here now. Get out into the hallway and eat with the homeless." I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and did something she never saw coming. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. My name is Helen Parker. I am 62 years old. And I believed I knew my son better than anyone alive. Mothers always do, don't they? We memorize their first cries, the shape of their hands, the way they look when they are tired or lying. I used to think Ethan's face was the one map I could never lose my way on. But that morning, I found out I had been walking blind for years. It began with a key, a small brass thing that still smelled faintly of oil from the locksmith shop. Ethan had left it with me weeks ago, when I had stopped by his new Riverside apartment to help with curtains. He never asked for it back. Maybe he forgot, or maybe, back then, I thought it meant trust. That morning, I baked a loaf of sourdough, the kind he loved since boyhood, when I would smear butter on a slice fresh out of the oven just to watch his smile widen. I poured chamomile tea into a jar, packed both into a cloth bag, and told myself I would surprise him. The Riverside building gleamed like a polished tooth. Too white, too clean, the kind of place that didn't smell of families but of disinfectant. The lobby mirror caught me off guard. I looked older than I felt, my hair more silver than gold. Still, I lifted my chin, pressed the elevator button and told myself, he'll be happy to see me. He'll remember who has always been there for him. The hallway outside his door was quiet. A soft hum from the city came through the windows, muted by the glass. I slid the key into the lock, turning it gently so the metal wouldn't click. The door opened with a sigh, like the apartment itself was reluctantly allowing me in. The air inside was sharp with cedar wood and vanilla. Not my world. My home always smelled of onions frying, lemon soap, or wet laundry on racks. I stepped inside, holding my breath, and then I heard them. Voices. Low, and asterisk mate, close enough that my chest clenched. I panicked. My eyes darted around the room. The coat closet stood ajar, lined with Brooke's fur-trimmed coats and Ethan's navy blazers. I slipped inside, pressing myself between the hanging clothes. The bag with the sourdough clutched against my ribs like a shield. My knees bent awkwardly, my back pressed against the wall. The scent of Brooke's perfume, expensive, floral, nauseating, surrounded me. The door shut almost completely. Thin slats of light leaked in, letting me see strips of the living room. I forced myself still, though my pulse thundered loud enough to give me away. Then he came in. Ethan. My boy. He still walked like he did as a teenager. Confident, careless, as if the world would always bend to him. He was in a pressed shirt, collar unbuttoned. On his lap, Brooke settled herself like a queen claiming her throne. A bottle of champagne sweated on the table, glasses half full. Brooke raised hers, tilting her head. "Are you sure no one will suspect when it happens?" The casualness of her tone pierced me. She spoke as though discussing dinner plans. Ethan's hand traced lazily through her hair. "The plan's perfect. Mom will slip on the stairs in her old house. Totally natural." For a second, I thought I had misheard. My mind fought the words, rearranging them into something less monstrous. But Brooke leaned in, eyes sharp, lips curling. "Good. Because once the house sells, that's 220. Add her life insurance. What's the payout? 100. 100. Ethan confirmed, voice flat. Enough to cover the new mortgage, clear the cards. Finally breathe. My knees nearly buckled. I pressed a hand against my mouth to trap the cry clawing its way up my throat. My son, my only child, was reciting the arithmetic of my death. Brooke clinked her glass against his. And Mark and Diane get their agreed share. Everyone happy. Mark. My brother. Diane his wife. The names twisted like knives. They're already counting on it, Ethan added. Diane even said Mom won't last long. Too stubborn to see the signs. They laughed. Laughed. The coat closet spun around me. I clutched the sourdough so tightly the crust cracked, crumbs scattering inside the bag. My lungs begged for air, but I couldn't make a sound. Brooke rested her head against Ethan's chest. What about the will? What if she changes it? She won't, Ethan said. His certainty was a dagger. She trusts me. Always has. I'm her golden boy, remember? She'd never see it coming. The words cracked something inside me. Memories rushed in unbidden. Ethan at 8, crying over scraped knees as I pressed a bandage and kissed the wound. Ethan at 12, clutching the second-hand laptop I had bought with money saved from cleaning offices at dawn. Ethan at 18, face flushed with pride when I signed the papers for his college loan after selling my wedding ring. Every sacrifice replayed like a cruel montage behind the slats of that closet door, mocking me. Brooke swirled her champagne, eyes glittering. She does keep that staircase cluttered. Books, rugs, old banisters. Easy to frame it as an accident. Ethan shrugged. One good push. Or just wait. Gravity will do the work. They both chuckled again. I felt the bread slip from my grasp and fall softly against my shoes. My fingers trembled uncontrollably. My heart thudded so violently I was sure they could hear it through the wood. You're not scared? Brooke whispered, almost playfully. Of what? A 62-year-old woman? She won't know a thing. And once she's gone, everything falls neatly into place. Finally, no more begging her for help, no more guilt trips. Just peace. Peace. That was the word he used for my death. I wanted to burst from the closet, to grab him, shake him, scream. I gave you everything. But my body refused. It locked me there, paralyzed, as if even my own muscles betrayed me. Brooke leaned in closer, murmuring, You'll handle the paperwork? Already checked. Life insurance pays out within 2 weeks if the death looks accidental. Cremation's cheaper. Fast, no service. Done before anyone asks questions. Cremation. No service. No goodbye. My throat burned. Silent tears streaked my cheeks, dampening Brooke's fur sleeve where it brushed against me through the closet slats. Ethan poured more champagne, his voice calm. By Christmas, we'll be in the new house. Mom's place sold. Debts cleared, everything fresh. Brooke smiled, clinking her glass once more. To new beginnings. They drank. In that dim closet, I felt something inside me harden. Not shatter, not scream, just freeze. My love, my trust, every hour bent over a mop or sewing Ethan's school costumes. It all calcified into a cold, sharp resolve. For the first time in 62 years, I understood. My only child, the boy I thought I had raised into a man, was ready to bury me alive for money. And the woman he called his wife was teaching him how. And I realized, as the champagne fizzed and their laughter filled the apartment, that if I made one sound, just one, they would know I knew. And if they knew, I wouldn't leave that apartment alive. So I stayed still, silent, listening, memorizing every word. Because survival, I understood in that moment, would mean pretending to be the fool they believed I was. At least until I could decide whether I wanted to die on their terms, or live on mine. To understand what I heard in that apartment, I have to rewind. To tell you why I was there with a spare key pressed in my palm. Why I still believed my son would smile at the sight of bread fresh from my oven. You have to know what it cost me to raise him, what I gave, and how willingly I laid down piece after piece of myself, until there was almost nothing left. I was 33 when Robert died. My husband, my partner, my first and only love. A construction site, a faulty scaffold, a fall that broke his spine before the ambulance could arrive. They told me it was quick. As if speed softens the weight of a coffin lowered into the ground. Ethan was 8. Old enough to remember the way his father's laugh filled a room. Too young to understand why he would never hear it again. I remember his small hands clinging to mine at the funeral, his body trembling against me as though I could shield him from the grave itself. That day I swore, before God, before Robert's grave, before the boy in my arms, that I would carry everything. Every burden, every need, every dream. And I did. I scrubbed floors in downtown offices at 5 in the morning, the chemical sting of bleach my daily perfume. I took shifts in a diner at night, my apron stiff with grease. On weekends I baked pies, loaves, muffins, whatever the church bazaar or the farmer's market would take. My fingers were always raw from scrubbing or scorched from ovens, but I smiled at Ethan as though pain were a stranger. The wedding ring Robert had given me, gold, simple, engraved with forever. I sold for Ethan's first computer. He was 12, wide-eyed, obsessed with the idea of becoming a lawyer. Lawyers protect people, Mom, he told me, his small voice so certain. I swallowed the ache of pawning my last link to Robert and handed Ethan that clunky second-hand computer, as though it were treasure. His joy made the sacrifice feel holy. When tuition time came, I begged my brother Mark for help. He was well off, an accountant who prided himself on his tidy life. I remember standing in his kitchen, my palms damp, explaining Ethan's dream of law school. Mark leaned back, sipping coffee, his eyes cold. "Not risking my savings on your son's pipe dreams," he sneered. His wife Diane smirked, murmuring something about how generosity only breeds laziness. I left with nothing but shame. But I worked harder. 2 jobs at a time. Sometimes 3. I skipped meals so Ethan wouldn't. I patched the same coat for him winter after winter, my stitches crooked but strong. I learned to stretch $1 until it screamed. And somehow it was enough. Ethan was accepted into law school. I remember his acceptance letter trembling in his hands as he read it aloud to me, his voice cracking with joy. We cried together that night, huddled on our worn couch, the TV flickering behind us. For the first time, I believed all the sacrifices had meaning. He graduated, became a lawyer. My boy, a professional, dressed in suits I could never have afforded. He married Brooke, a woman from a wealthy family, polished and elegant, who carried herself like money had always bent toward her. Their wedding was in a glass ballroom overlooking the river. I drained my savings to contribute, wanting Ethan's day to shine. I paid for flowers, for catering extras, for Brooke's gown alterations. My gift to him was everything I had left. And yet gratitude was short-lived. At first, they spoke of me with affection, thanked me for my help. But soon the tone shifted. Brooke's voice, once polite, grew sharp with condescension. She would glance at my old house in Woodbury and sigh. "It's quaint. But don't you think it's dangerous to live there alone? Those stairs." Her eyes would flicker to Ethan, and he would nod, already calculating. I thought they worried about me. That's what children are supposed to do when their parents grow old, isn't it? They ask about insurance, about wills, about safety rails on stairs. But looking back, it wasn't care. It was inventory. 6 months before the night in the apartment, Ethan and Brooke began fixating on a gated community house near the lake. "Perfect for raising kids," Brooke said, though she never lifted a finger toward motherhood. Ethan talked about mortgage rates, down payments, the strain of debt. Their questions grew pointed. "Mom, what's your life insurance worth again? Do you still have savings from Dad's account? When you're ready to downsize, we should help you sell the Woodbury place." I laughed then, brushing it off. I thought they were being practical, planning ahead. I even felt proud that my sacrifices had built enough that my son could imagine a safer, easier future. But now, when I think of Brooke's smile as she asked about my policy, I see the calculation behind it. I hear the edge in her voice when she said, "You never know with stairs and blood pressure." They weren't checking in. They were circling, like vultures above a body not yet cold. It makes me sick now, remembering the small humiliations I ignored. The way Brooke once lifted my thrift store handbag with 2 fingers as if it were sticky. The way Ethan laughed at my old car, calling it prehistoric. The way they always offered to help me manage bills, as though I were a child with coins instead of a woman who had stretched every dollar to buy his textbooks. I see it now. Their gratitude curdled into expectation, and expectation into entitlement. My love became currency, my sacrifices receipts. Every hour I bent my back, every coin I saved, it was all taken as their due. And still, until the day I hid in that closet, I didn't know. I couldn't imagine that love so deep could be twisted into a motive for murder. Because in my mind, Ethan was still the boy who clutched my hand at Robert's grave. He was still the teenager I stayed up with all night, quizzing him for exams. He was still the young man who hugged me in his cap and gown, whispering, "We made it, Mom." But standing in his riverside apartment, breadcrumbs scattered at my feet, I understood. Love had a price. And I had already paid it. Once you see betrayal clearly, you start noticing how deep its roots spread. That night, after hiding in the closet and hearing my own son plan my accident, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn, the sourdough untouched on the counter, the clock ticking like a metronome marking the death of illusions. And I started watching. Really watching. It was the numbers that gave them away. Ethan's salary as a junior lawyer was about $6,000 a month. Decent, but not extraordinary. Brooke didn't work. She never had. Yet their lifestyle sparkled like glass towers. $200 dinners 3 times a week, handbags that cost more than my monthly pension, rent of $3,000 in a riverside building where even the wallpaper seemed smug. I asked myself how. The answer came in whispers. At work, during one of my shifts at the diner, I overheard Diane, my sister-in-law, Mark's sharp-tongued wife, gossiping with a friend in the corner booth. They thought the clatter of dishes would drown them out, but I heard every word. Helen's been stingy all her life, Diane said, her voice slick with disdain. Mark's right. It's time the family got what it deserves. That stubborn old woman won't last long anyway. Might as well use what she's hoarding before the bank does. I froze mid-wipe, the damp rag in my hand dripping onto the tile. The casual cruelty of her tone made my skin crawl. To her, my life wasn't measured in moments or love, but in bank balances and square footage. That night, I confronted them. I drove to Mark and Diane's house, my heart hammering against my ribs. Their living room smelled of leather and cigar smoke, a shrine to their middle-class pride. Mark leaned back in his recliner, a glass of whiskey in hand. Diane perched on the armrest like a crow. I know you've been talking about me, I said without preamble. My voice shook, but it was steady enough to cut through their smugness. About my accounts, my house, my policy. They didn't deny it. They didn't even look ashamed. Diane smirked, flipping her hair. Well, isn't it true? You've been sitting on that Woodbury place for decades. What's it worth now? $220? More. Mark swirled his glass, ice cold. You've been lucky, Helen. Some of us think it's time that luck benefited the whole family. You've lived in that house alone long enough. Don't you think it's time to contribute? Contribute? I spat. I raised Ethan alone while you sneered at me. I worked 3 jobs while you turned me away. And now you want to carve me up like a carcass? Mark's mouth twisted. Don't be dramatic. You're 62. How many good years do you think you've got left? 10? 15? You can't take the money with you. It's mine, I whispered, more to myself than to them. Mine to give. Not yours to steal. Diane laughed. A brittle, ugly sound. 10 grand? That's what you gave Ethan at the wedding. That's a joke compared to what's coming. We're talking real money now, Helen. Not scraps. Her words landed heavier than a slap. $10,000. The sum of months of saved wages, every penny of sacrifice, dismissed as a joke. I stood there, trembling, watching their faces. And I realized something chilling. If I argued, if I screamed, if I begged, it would only make them cautious. They already smelled blood in the water. The more I resisted, the quicker they would move to finish me. So I said nothing more. I left their house in silence, my nails digging into my palms so deeply, I left crescent moons in the skin. Back home, I poured myself a cup of coffee I couldn't drink. My hands shook too violently. I stared at the dark liquid, thinking of Ethan's voice. Mom will slip on the stairs. Totally natural. It wasn't just greed. It was a plan. A conspiracy with the precision of legal contracts, family signatures already inked in invisible blood. That's when I understood. Love would not save me. Loyalty would not protect me. If I wanted to live, I needed evidence. Proof so strong that their own words would bury them. I began with the simple things. Watching patterns. Brooke's sudden interest in my medications, casually asking, "You still taking those pills for your pressure?" I never had blood pressure issues. Ethan's repeated offers to help me sort through my insurance papers. Diane's gossip about how confused I'd been lately, planting seeds of doubt before anyone had reason to question me. They weren't just waiting for my fall. They were preparing the ground, rehearsing the narrative. Poor Helen, she was slipping. Poor Helen, she was careless. Poor Helen, she was old. I thought back to every humiliation I had swallowed. Brooke turning my thrift store blouse inside out and saying, "This fabric pills so easily, doesn't it?" Ethan sighing when I gave him a modest birthday gift. As though my love came with a price tag. Diane's laughter when she saw my grocery cart filled with discounted staples. Still eating like a poor widow? I replayed them all. And each moment became another piece of evidence in my private trial against them. Not admissible in court, maybe, but carved into my heart with enough force to replace fear with rage. That rage hardened into clarity. Arguments wouldn't save me. Pleading wouldn't change them. But proof could bring them down. Proof could strip the mask from their faces in front of the world. So I began planning. Not for survival alone, but for justice. Because they thought I was already as good as dead. And that, I decided, would be my greatest in. It came disguised as family time. That was always their way, venom sweetened with honey, cruelty wrapped in concern. A week after I confronted Mark and Diane, Ethan called with the kind of voice sons use when they want to sound dutiful, but can't quite hide the strain. "Mom, we should have dinner together. Just us. It's been too long." His tone was light, but something in the pause afterward unsettled me. And then he added casually, "Wear that green dress, the one you wore at Brooke's birthday last year. She said it looks nice on you." The request was too specific, too rehearsed. A dress chosen not for me, but for the performance they were about to stage. I hung up the phone and stared at the receiver long after the dial tone went dead. That evening I pulled the dress from my closet. Dark green, modest, bought secondhand and altered with my own clumsy stitching. I ironed it carefully, though my hands trembled. In the mirror, I saw a woman trying to play the part her son had written for her. A mother, dignified, naive, obedient enough to walk straight into whatever trap was waiting. The riverside apartment glowed when I arrived, lights too bright, candles too fragrant. Brooke greeted me at the door with a kiss on the cheek that barely brushed my skin. Her perfume clouded the air, sharp and invasive. "You look lovely, Helen," she said. Her eyes flickered over the dress like an appraiser checking a gemstone of questionable worth. Ethan was already at the table, wine poured, napkins folded like swans. The performance had big asterisk in. We ate roasted chicken, vegetables glistening with butter, wine flowing more freely than conversation. Every bite felt like sawdust in my mouth. Ethan leaned forward with that practiced lawyer's smile. "Mom, we were talking earlier about how important it is to have things in order. You never know what could happen. Stairs, blood pressure, you know." My fork hovered midair. His tone was mild, almost paternal, as though I were the child and he the caretaker. Brooke reached across the table, her manicured hand brushing mine. "You should really update your will, Helen. Just to be safe. That way, if something unexpected happened, you'd know everything was handled properly." Her nails gleamed under the chandelier, sharp as claws. I smiled faintly, though my stomach twisted. "I appreciate your concern." My voice was even, my mask flawless. Inside, I was cataloging every glance, every word. Ethan's eyes darting to Brooke before each suggestion. Brooke's subtle nods. The way her tone sharpened whenever the house or insurance was mentioned. They weren't asking. They were rehearsing. Testing my reactions, measuring how close I was to yielding. After dinner, they insisted on walking me back into my own house. I wanted to refuse, but to refuse would be to raise suspicion. So I let them trail behind me, their voices echoing in my old stairwell. Brooke's heels clicked against the wood as she ran her fingers along the banister. "This railing feels loose, Helen. Dangerous." Ethan adjusted the rug in the hallway with a small frown. "You really should get rid of this. Easy to trip." Their words were casual, but the way their eyes lingered on the steps, the rugs, the lights, they weren't concerned. They were scouting, plotting angles of accident. I nodded politely, my face calm. Inside, my heart pounded like a trapped bird. When they finally left, their smiles too wide, I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, my breath shaking. My house, the home Robert and I had built, no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a stage set for my death, each creaking step another cue for their performance of grief. That night, I sat alone in the green dress, the silence pressing in. My reflection in the window looked like a ghost already. Eyes hollow, mouth a thin line of fear. And then something shifted. If I waited, I would die. That much was clear. Waiting meant giving them the advantage, allowing them to choose the moment, the rug, the stair, the final push. If they wanted an accident, I would give them one, on my terms, not theirs. But I couldn't do it alone. I would need someone I could trust, someone outside the circle of betrayal. Someone who would help me plan not just survival, but proof. The thought scared me as much as it steadied me. I had carried burdens alone for so long that asking for help felt unnatural. But this was no longer about pride. This was about life or death. I folded the dress and put it back in the closet. It smelled faintly of wine and Brooke's perfume. I pressed it flat with trembling hands and whispered to myself, "Enough." That dinner was not family time. It was a rehearsal. A dress rehearsal for my funeral. And if they thought I would simply stand in the wings, waiting for the curtain to fall, they were about to learn that this mother still had a role to play. The night after the dinner rehearsal, I understood there would be no time left to hesitate. If I lingered in passivity, they would act first. Brooke's hand on the banister, Ethan's comment about the rug, those weren't concerns. They were scouting reports. If I wanted to live, I had to step off their stage and build one of my own. But I couldn't do it alone. The name came to me as naturally as breath, Nancy. My neighbor of 12 years, 70 years old, retired nurse. She had been the one who brought soup when I caught the flu, the one who clipped roses from her garden and left them on my porch in the summers. More importantly, she had never once asked about my bank accounts or my will. That morning, I knocked on her door with hands trembling. She answered in her housecoat, silver hair in a bun, sharp eyes softening the moment she saw my face. "Helen? You look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed at the irony. "Not yet," I whispered. "But I might, if I don't act." In her kitchen, over mugs of black tea, I told her everything. The coat closet. The champagne. Ethan's voice describing my fall as though it were a business transaction. Brooke's icy smile. Mark and Diane's greedy arithmetic. Every word spilled out, jagged and raw. Nancy listened, lips pressed tight, eyes widening. When I finished, the silence was heavy enough to crush me. Then she set her cup down with a decisive clink. "It's madness," she said. "But I believe you. God help me, I believe you." "Then what do I do?" My voice cracked. "If I confront them, they'll just hurry. If I wait, they'll succeed. I can't go to the police with whispers and overheard words. I need proof. I need to see what they do when they think I'm gone." She studied me for a long moment, her nurse's gaze assessing not my pulse, but my resolve. Then she leaned forward. "Then we'll give them what they want. We'll give them your death. Safely." The plan grew from that seed. We called it, half joking, half praying, Project Zero Pulse. Nancy explained how we could simulate death, medications to slow my vitals to near invisibility, her steady hands checking every number. She knew the paramedics in our area, young Tyler among them, eager but inexperienced. "If he comes, he'll take my word. He'll pronounce you. And Dr. Harris at the morgue still owes me a favor. He'll sign what I tell him to sign." The risks chilled me. "What if I don't wake up?" "You will," she said firmly. "I'll be monitoring you. You trust me." I did. More than I trusted blood. For 2 weeks we prepared. Nancy measured doses with the precision of a jeweler, tested equipment, practiced her script for the emergency call. I bought small hidden cameras, disguising them as smoke detectors and photo frames, placing them in my house with trembling hands. If my family came to feast, I would catch every bite. We rehearsed everything. I would eat lightly that morning. Nancy would administer the medication. My body would slow, heartbeat, breath, temperature, all sinking toward silence. She would call 911, her voice laced with practiced panic. Tyler would arrive. The pronouncement would be made. Paperwork filed. And Helen Parker, 62, would officially cease to exist. On the chosen Sunday, the air felt too still, as though even the wind sensed what was coming. I wore a simple nightgown, the kind no one photographs. Nancy's living room was dim, blinds drawn, her medical kit laid out like altar offerings. "Are you ready?" she asked. "As ready as anyone can be to die." The first injection burned faintly. My limbs grew heavy. The second slowed my chest, each breath longer to arrive. My pulse, once frantic, stumbled into sluggish beats. The world tilted, sound stretching thin like pulled taffy. I remember Nancy's face above me, her hand gripping mine. "Stay calm. You're safe. I've got you." But safety felt distant as my body betrayed me. Fingers numb. Tongue thick. My chest barely rising. I wanted to scream, but the effort would have broken me. Darkness seeped in at the edges. Then nothing. When awareness returned, it was in fragments. Voices. A siren. Nancy's practice sobs. She just collapsed. Please hurry. A man's voice, young and uncertain. No pulse. Time of death, 3:47. I wanted to open my eyes to protest. But my body was stone. There were other voices, radio chatter, the hiss of a zipper. My body was lifted, moved, handled like an object. I drifted in and out, each moment a jagged shard of memory. The cold of a gurney, the jostle of wheels, the faint scent of antiseptic. And then silence. When I opened my eyes fully again, it was to the dim light of Nancy's basement. She leaned over me, relief flooding her lined face. Welcome back, Lazarus, she whispered, tears shining. I tried to speak, but only a rasp came. My throat ached from the absence of breath. You were gone for 30 minutes, she said. Pronounced, documented, filed. On paper, Helen Parker no longer exists. I lay there, weak as a newborn, the weight of what had just happened pressing down like earth on a coffin lid. I had died. My son's wish had been granted. My family believed themselves free. But in truth, I was beneath their gaze, waiting, watching. If they wanted to carve up my life, I would let them, while cameras rolled and the trap tightened. And then, when the time was right, I would rise from the grave they dug for me. Not as a victim, but as their reckoning. Death, I discovered, doesn't come with trumpets or revelations. It comes with silence. After Nancy brought me back in her basement, my body still trembled from the edge of the abyss. My veins felt hollow, my chest sore from being forced to the brink of nothing. I lay on the narrow cot she had prepared, weak but awake, the smell of damp concrete mixing with antiseptic. Upstairs, the cameras I had planted blinked their red eyes. In every room of my house, they waited, silent witnesses, hungrier for truth than any detective. My plan was fragile, my body fragile, but the trap was set. Nancy handed me headphones linked to the system. Her hands were steady, her voice not. They'll come soon. People like that don't wait long. She was right. The first call came barely 2 hours after my pronouncement. I heard it through Nancy's phone, her voice calm as she told Ethan. I'm so sorry, Ethan. Helen collapsed. There was nothing they could do. Time of death, 3:47. A pause. Then Ethan's voice, flat as a courtroom verdict. So it's over. No sob, no gasp, no grief. Only relief. When Nancy hung up, I pressed my fists to my mouth to smother the cry clawing its way up. My son had received the news of my death, and his first emotion was freedom. Later that evening, the front door of my Woodbury house opened. On the screen before me, black coats and dark suits filed in. Ethan, Brooke, Mark, and Diane, my mourners, dressed not for sorrow but for conquest. No silence of respect, no bowed heads. They moved quickly, like wolves through a slaughtered pen. Ethan went straight to my desk, pulling drawers, rifling through envelopes. Insurance policy. 100,000. Sole beneficiary me. His voice was matter-of-fact, like reading a grocery list. Brooke walked through the living room, glancing at curtains, carpets, chairs. Sell what we can, toss the rest. Cremation, no service. Faster and cheaper. Diane sat at the dining table with a notebook, scribbling columns. House value, furniture, car, jewelry. Though God knows she had little worth keeping. Her pen scratched like claws across paper. Mark picked up a framed photograph of Ethan as a boy. The one I had kept by my bedside for decades. He turned it over once, scoffed, and tossed it into the trash bin. I clutched Nancy's hand so tightly she winced. My family was erasing me in real time. Not even pretending to grieve. Just accountants tallying the corpse of my life. On the camera feed, Ethan's phone buzzed. He answered briskly. Yes, list the house this week. Urgent sale. Don't bother with repairs. As is. As is. That was what my home, my life, had been reduced to, a transaction. Brooke poured herself a glass of wine from my cabinet, sipping with a satisfied smirk. Finally free of the burden. Burden. That was the word. Not mother. Not sister. Burden. They laughed together, their voices echoing through the walls I had painted with my own hands, the floors I had scrubbed on my knees. My grief curdled into something colder. Exposure, I realized, would not be enough. It wasn't enough to catch them red-handed, to prove their greed to the law. They needed humiliation. They needed the world to see them for what they were. Conspirators, liars, vultures in black. I stared at the screen, at Ethan rifling through the very drawers where I had hidden his report cards and Father's Day cards he once wrote with crayon. My chest tightened with the cruel symmetry. Childhood drawings replaced with death certificates. Innocence rewritten into conspiracy. Nancy whispered, "Helen, you'll have your justice." I shook my head. Not justice. Reckoning. For hours I watched them. They bickered over percentages, mocked my old furniture, scoffed at the food in my pantry. They spoke of me in the past tense, though my heart still beat, faint but defiant, in Nancy's basement. Every sentence they uttered became another nail in their own coffin. When they finally left, the house echoed with absence. Not of me, but of love, of memory, of every trace of family. And in that void, I found resolve sharper than any blade. They thought they had buried me, but I was alive. And when I rose, I would make sure the world saw them not as heirs, but as carrion feeders exposed under a merciless light. The vultures had come, feasted, and left. My house smelled of them even after they were gone. Cologne, perfume, the sour scent of greed. I sat in Nancy's basement watching the camera feeds replay, over and over, like a self-inflicted wound. Each laugh, each cruel phrase echoed inside me until sleep became impossible. But replaying wasn't enough. If I wanted more than survival, I needed their words recorded beyond my house. I needed evidence not just of opportunity, but of conspiracy. Words that would sound damning, not whispered in closets but amplified in courtrooms. Nancy was the one who suggested it. "We bug them," she said simply. "Car, office, living room. Places they feel safest." I stared at her, astonished by her calm. "Nancy, that's illegal." "So is conspiring to K*LLU, she sh*T back." Her eyes softened. "Helen, you don't need courage anymore. You need proof." That week, we became thieves of truth. Nancy distracted Brooke at the grocery store, chatting loudly about recipes, while I slipped into her car parked outside. My hands shook as I peeled back the lining under the dashboard, tucking the device into place. The smell of Brooke's perfume clung to the upholstery, sharp and nauseating. At Ethan's office, I wore plain clothes, carrying a bag that made me look like any cleaning woman. My heart thundered as I slipped into his conference room while he was in court, sliding a bug beneath the underside of his desk. My reflection in the polished wood looked pale, ghost-like. Mark was easiest. He always bragged about his home bar, pouring drinks until his voice slurred. Nancy visited Diane under the pretense of catching up, and while laughter rang in the kitchen, I crept into the living room and planted the device behind a stack of dusty ledgers. And then we waited. The first recordings chilled me more than the closet conversation had. Ethan's voice relaxed, certain. "Policy pays out in a week. Mom's cremation is scheduled. Finally free of the burden." Brooke's laugh followed. "Mark's perfect plan. Everyone gets their share." Diane's voice nasal and sharp. Surprised she lasted this long. I thought she'd keel over years ago. Each sentence landed like a lash. But this time I had them, not just as wounds, but as P***ns. When Nancy and I played the recordings back, her face hardened. "This isn't just evidence. This is rot. They'll wriggle, Helen. They'll cry and make excuses. But if we air this where no excuse can stand." Her words sparked the thought I had been circling. Exposure in private wasn't enough. Families can bury shame behind closed doors. No, I needed to drag them into daylight, into a place where denial would collapse under the weight of their own voices. That's when I called Kelly Reid. Kelly was a reporter from Channel 7, known for tearing the masks off crooked officials and fraudsters. Her voice on the line was brisk, skeptical at first. "Mrs. Parker, we get a dozen calls a day. Why should I believe you?" I swallowed hard, then played her 30 seconds of Ethan and Brooke plotting. The silence that followed was electric. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "In my son's apartment. In my brother's house. In my own home. You're telling me your family conspired to murder you for insurance money? I'm telling you, I said slowly, that they already believe I'm dead. Another pause. Then Kelly exhaled. All right, I'll come. And I'm bringing a recorder. The next evening, she sat in Nancy's kitchen, headphones pressed to her ears, her eyes widening as she listened to every vile word. When the tape ended, she pulled them off and looked at me with something between horror and admiration. This isn't just a story. This is dynamite. I don't want pity pieces, I said firmly. I want them caught, exposed, arrested. Kelly nodded. Then we'll need police. And a judge. But with this, you've got them. The plan was set. The bait would be a will reading, an event Ethan himself had scheduled for Saturday at my house, a chance to cement his control. We would let them gather, let them tally, let them toast their victory. And then, with cameras rolling live, I would return from the grave. The thought alone made my skin prickle. Appearing in that room, watching their faces crack, hearing their gasps. But more than drama, it was necessity. They had thrived in shadows. I would drag them into a light so blinding the whole world would see. The night before, I opened my closet and pulled out the red dress I had worn to Ethan's wedding. My savings had gone into that dress. The one that made me feel like I still belonged in his new, glittering world. I remembered standing in the mirror, Robert's photo on the dresser, whispering, he would be proud today. Now the same dress would become my armor. My son's happiest day turned against him. His bride's triumph inverted into disgrace. My resurrection would be staged not in mourning black, but in crimson, a warning, a wound, a rebirth. Nancy helped me zip it up, her hands gentle, her voice steady. You'll need to be calm. They'll scream. They'll lie. Don't let them shake you. I met her gaze in the mirror. I've already been to the grave. What's left to fear? Saturday came. My house was prepared, every camera in place, every wire ready. Police waited discreetly. Kelly's crew set up outside, the broadcast primed. And I sat in Nancy's basement one last time, watching the vultures circle above my house, waiting for the perfect moment to descend. This time, it would be their last meal. Saturday. My funeral's curtain call. The house was crowded when the hour struck 3. Through Nancy's monitor I watched Ethan pace my living room with a folder tucked under his arm. His expression solemn, rehearsed. Brooke sat poised on the couch, legs crossed, her silk blouse gleaming. Diane hunched over her notebook, her pen ready like a wee *P*N. Mark poured himself whiskey at my cabinet as if the house were already his. Kelly's camera crew adjusted their equipment outside, the red light glowing. The police stood discreetly in the hallway, plain clothes, waiting for my signal. I smoothed my red dress, the fabric heavy with memory. My pulse was steady, not fear, but a cold current of resolve. At 3:15 Ethan cleared his throat, holding up the folder. We're here today to honor my mother's wishes, he said, his voice dipped in manufactured grief. As her only son, I'll be handling the documents regarding her estate. Brooke leaned in, eyes glinting. Finally, some closure. Closure. A word they confused with profit. That was my cue. I opened the door. The hinges groaned, the sound slicing through their conversation. The camera turned, capturing the moment. Brooke's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. Diane gasped, clutching her chest, her lips forming the word ghost. Mark froze mid-sip, whiskey spilling down his sleeve. Ethan's face drained of color, his folder dropping with a flutter of papers. I stepped into the room, my heels tapping against the wood, my red dress blazing beneath the light. Hello, family, I said, my voice calm, resonant. Am I interrupting? For a moment, silence reigned, thick and suffocating. Then Brooke screamed, a raw animal sound. Diane stammered. It can't be. You're dead. Tyler pronounced you dead. Ethan's lips parted, searching for words. Mom, how? Kelly Reed's voice cut in, sharp and clear. We're live, Mrs. Parker. Tell us what's happening. I faced the camera, my hands steady. What's happening is simple. My son, my brother, my sister-in-law, and his wife conspired to murder me for money. They believed I was dead. They planned to sell my home, cash my insurance, and divide the spoils. The room erupted. Lies. Diane shrieked. She's insane, this is a trick. I held up a small recorder, pressing play. Ethan's voice filled the air. Mom will slip on the stairs in her old house. Totally natural. Brooke lunged forward. That's fake. Edited. I pressed another button. Diane's sneer echoed. That stubborn old woman won't last long anyway. Mark's voice followed, flat and greedy. You can't take the money with you. The silence that followed was deafening. The crew's cameras captured every twitch, every bead of sweat. Brooke broke first. We were joking, it was hypothetical. You can't take it seriously. Kelly's eyes narrowed. Joking about your mother-in-law's death? While discussing her insurance payout. The officers stepped forward, hands on cuffs. Ethan snapped then, his mask crumbling. Mom, I love you. You know I'd never hurt you. His voice cracked, desperate. It was Brooke, she pushed it. I turned to him, my voice cold as stone. Love doesn't plan a cremation without a goodbye. Love doesn't list a house before the body's in the ground. The officers moved in. Ethan Parker, Brooke Parker, Mark Parker, Diane Price. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. Brooke's shrill protests filled the air. Diane wept, muttering curses. Mark went silent, his jaw locked. Ethan struggled as the cuffs closed around his wrists, his eyes locked on me, wide with betrayal. You did this to us, he shouted. You ruined everything. No, Ethan, I said, my gaze unwavering. You ruined yourself. The cameras caught it all. Their downfall, their disgrace, their masks torn away. My living room, once filled with laughter and holidays, now became a courtroom, a stage, an execution ground of reputations. As they were let out, Ethan twisted back one last time. Mom, please don't let them take me. I held his gaze, the weight of 30 years pressing on my chest. You already left me, Ethan. Long before today. And then he was gone, dragged into the light of cameras, his name forever tied to betrayal. The house grew still. I stood in the red dress, the silence ringing louder than screams. Kelly stepped closer, her microphone trembling. Mrs. Parker, she asked softly. What do you feel right now? I looked at the shattered glass on the floor, the overturned chair, the door still swinging from their exit. My voice came low, steady. I feel alive. The trial drew headlines before it even began. Family conspiracy, mother returns from the dead. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, cameras flashing, microphones thrust like P***NS at every angle. I walked through them in a plain black suit, Nancy at my side, Kelly Reed trailing with her crew. The red dress was folded away. Today was not for spectacle. Today was for judgment. Inside, the air was thick with murmurs. The gallery was full, neighbors, strangers, journalists. I caught the eyes of people who had once waved kindly from across fences, now staring at me as though I were both miracle and monster. At the defense table sat Ethan, Brooke, Mark, and Diane. Their clothes were neat, their lawyers polished, but their faces betrayed them. Ethan's jaw clenched, his eyes avoiding mine. Brooke's lips were pressed so tightly they whitened. Diane wore a mask of indifference that cracked whenever a whisper rippled through the crowd. Mark sat slumped, as though already defeated. The proceedings began with the defense. Their lead attorney, a silver-haired man with a voice like polished glass, stood before the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is not a case of conspiracy, but of manipulation. My clients were misled by a woman who staged her own death, who invaded their privacy with illegal recordings, who orchestrated a performance to paint her own family as villains. He turned toward me, gesturing as though I were a dangerous stranger. This is not the act of a loving mother. This is theater. I kept my eyes forward, hands folded in my lap. Then came the recordings. One by one, played on the courtroom speakers, their voices filled the chamber. Ethan's cold calculation. Mom will slip on the stairs. Totally natural. Brooke's icy arithmetic. Insurance, house, cremation, fast and cheaper. Diane's sneer. That stubborn old woman won't last long anyway. Mark's contempt. You can't take the money with you. Each word was a blade, but this time they didn't wound me. They cut them. Jurors shifted uncomfortably. One woman shook her head, pressing her lips together as tears welled in her eyes. The defense objected. These recordings are inadmissible. They were obtained illegally. The judge, a stern man with eyes like slate, leaned forward. They were obtained within Mrs. Parker's own home and property, where she had full right to record. Furthermore, they were necessary to protect her life. Objection overruled. The words landed like a gavel. Witnesses followed. Nancy testified about the staged collapse, her voice calm, her details meticulous. Tyler, the young paramedic, confirmed he had pronounced me dead, believing it genuine. Dr. Harris admitted he had signed off, trusting Nancy's word. Kelly testified to the chain of custody for the recordings, every step documented. Then came the defendants. Diane went first, her voice sharp, rehearsed. We never meant harm. We were venting. Families talk like that sometimes. The prosecutor leaned in. Families joke about pushing their mother downstairs? About cremating her without a service? Diane faltered, eyes darting. It was Brooke's idea. Gasps echoed in the gallery. Brooke's head snapped toward her, fury flashing. Next, Brooke took the stand. Her composure cracked almost immediately. It was Ethan. He hated his mother's control. He said we'd never be free until she died. The prosecutor pressed. Brooke's silence was answer enough. Mark spoke little. His lawyer urged him to remain quiet, but his few words sealed him. Helen always thought she was better than us. She had it coming. The jury shifted uncomfortably again, disgust written plain on their faces. And then Ethan. My son. He walked to the stand, shoulders squared, eyes hollow. Sworn in, he sat, gripping the edge of the witness box. Did you plot to K*LL your mother? The prosecutor asked. His voice cracked. No. I know. I was desperate. Brooke kept pressuring me. The debts, the house. We were drowning. I said things I didn't mean. Did you say you would profit from your mother's death? Ethan's silence screamed louder than words. The prosecutor played his recording again. Mom will slip on the stairs. Totally natural. The sound of his own voice broke him. His face crumpled, tears spilling as he shook his head. I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't mean it. But the jury saw not a son crushed by remorse, but a man caught by truth. Closing arguments carved the story clear. Greed, conspiracy, betrayal. My attorney spoke of the decades I spent raising Ethan alone. The sacrifices recorded in scars on my hands and lines on my face. She gave her life for her family, he told the jury. And they decided that wasn't enough. They wanted her death too. Deliberation lasted only 4 hours. The foreman stood, voice steady. We find Ethan Parker guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. We find Brooke Parker guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. We find Mark Parker guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud. We find Diane Price guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud. The sentences came swift. Ethan 20 years. Brooke 15. Mark 12. Diane 10. None looked at me. Not one. In the hallway afterward, I saw Ethan once more before they led him away. He stopped, cuffed hands trembling, tears streaking his face. Mom. I'm ashamed. I don't know how I became this. I studied him, the boy I once rocked to sleep buried under the man who had agreed to my death. My throat tightened, but my voice was firm. I remember the boy you were, Ethan. I hope prison helps you find him. But don't mistake shame for redemption. His eyes pleaded. Can you forgive me? Forgiveness, I said each word like iron, is earned. The boy I raised is buried. Only you can dig him out. But don't ask me to do it for you. They led him away, his sobs echoing down the corridor. I stood still, my hands clasped, the weight of finality pressing down. I had not only survived, I had won. But the victory was cold. Justice had been served. But the price of blood is never returned. After the verdict, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could never again live in the Woodbury house. My home had become a crime scene long before the police ever set foot inside. Every creaking stair carried the echo of Ethan's plan. Every rug felt like a trap waiting to trip me. Even the walls seemed to whisper the word accident, as if conspiring with them. So I sold it. The house Robert and I had bought with hope. The house where I raised Ethan. The house where I almost died. It went on the market stripped of memory. When the papers were signed, I didn't cry. I felt only the numb relief of a prisoner released from her cell. With the money, I bought a small cottage near Nancy's. It was modest, barely half the size of my old house, but it breathed safety. The garden was untamed, the shutters worn, yet it felt alive in a way Woodbury never would again. Nancy walked over most mornings, her cane tapping, her laughter filling the air. For the first time in years, I could sit on a porch without scanning the stairs for danger. I turned my funds into more than survival. Donations to shelters for single mothers. Scholarships for students scraping their way into law school the way Ethan once had. Children with dreams bigger than their wallets. When publishers and filmmakers came calling, wanting my story, I hesitated. But then I remembered the thousands of women who live in silence, whose children drain them dry, whose families treat them like bank accounts. If my pain could give them courage, it would not be wasted. The story spread faster than I imagined. Interviews. Documentaries. My face on screens I never thought I'd see. Letters arrived. Women telling me how they had finally cut off parasitic children. Widows who decided to change their wills. Fathers who realized they were being exploited. My betrayal became a mirror, and others finally dared to look. But the true gift came not from cameras, but from people who walked into my life quietly. My chosen family. Gabriella was the first. 58, sharp-eyed. Abandoned in a nursing home after her daughter drained her savings and disappeared. She read about me in the paper and wrote a trembling letter. I thought I was alone. Now I know I'm not. I invited her for tea. She never left. She became the sister I never had. Through Gabriella came others. Women with stories like mine. Betrayals written not in blood but in bank statements, wills, and cold silences at dinner tables. We gathered in my cottage kitchen, drinking coffee, sharing wounds. Some cried. Some raged. Some simply sat in the presence of people who understood. One evening, as Gabriella chopped onions at my counter, she laughed. A sound so rich it startled me. Helen, do you realize this is the first time I've cooked in years without someone criticizing me? Her laughter was contagious. Soon the kitchen filled with voices, with the smell of garlic and rosemary, with the sound of chairs scraping as more women squeezed around the table. It struck me then, this was what family was supposed to feel like. Not inheritance papers or whispered plots, but loyalty forged in truth. The contrast was searing. My old family, bound by greed, now rotted in prison. My new family, bound by pain, was blooming into something unbreakable. I had lost a son, a brother, a sister-in-law. In return, I had gained sisters, daughters, even grandchildren of the heart. On Sundays we planted flowers in the garden. Children of women who had been discarded by their own blood ran through the grass, laughing. I watched them and felt something loosen in my chest, something I thought had been buried with Robert. Joy. The cottage, once silent, became a sanctuary of noise. Pots clattering, laughter spilling, arguments over recipes. At night, when the house grew quiet again, I sat by the window and listened to the hum of crickets, the scent of roses drifting in. The silence was no longer heavy with suspicion. It was peaceful. I had rebuilt ground not with bricks or money, but with people who chose me. Not for what I could give, but for who I was. And in that I finally understood. Survival was not enough. To truly live again, I needed not just to escape death, but to plant myself in soil where betrayal could not grow. And in that little cottage, surrounded by women who had been broken but refused to stay broken, I began to bloom. 2 years passed after the trial, and time felt like a strange kind of mercy. My cottage settled around me like a second skin. The days unfolded with a rhythm I had forgotten. Mornings in the garden, afternoons spent writing letters or baking bread for neighbors, evenings with Gabriella, and the others laughing over too much wine. The shadows of Woodbury faded. My new life was not untouched by pain, but it was mine. Entirely mine. And then one morning, the letter came. It was a plain envelope, no return address, but the handwriting froze me where I stood. Ethan's. The same scrawl that once labeled school notebooks, that wrote birthday cards with uneven letters. My breath caught, my hands trembling as I slid it open. Inside, the words spilled heavy. He wrote of therapy in prison, of nights haunted by dreams where he saw me lying at the bottom of the stairs. He wrote of guilt, of shame, of memories of me bent over sinks scrubbing floors, of me selling my wedding ring for his computer, of pies baked at dawn to fund his textbooks. He wrote that he had replayed those memories until they cut him raw. He called himself a monster. He begged for forgiveness. He told me he still loved me. I read the letter once. Then again. Then a third time, each reading pulling me in different directions. Anger, sorrow, something faint that might have been compassion. I folded it carefully, set it on the table, walked away. But my eyes kept finding it, drawn back as though the paper itself were magnetic. For weeks I lived with it. The words sat inside me like stones in water, sinking deeper each day. At night, I would lie awake hearing his voice as a child, calling me Mom, with unguarded affection. By day, I heard the echo of his adult voice in that apartment. Mom will slip on the stairs. Totally natural. Both voices belonged to the same mouth. That was what tormented me. Finally, I decided I could not let the letter stand unanswered. I sat at my kitchen table, pen in hand, the garden blooming outside, and I began to write. I told him I had received his words, that I accepted his apology as acknowledgement of guilt. But forgiveness was not a gift handed freely like a coin tossed into a cup. It had to be earned, through years of work, through honesty, through transformation. I told him that the boy I had raised was buried under the man who agreed to my death. That only he could dig that boy out again. That if he truly wanted redemption, he must find it within himself. Not in my approval, not in my tears, not in the memory of the woman he had betrayed. I ended simply. My peace no longer depends on your words. I hope one day you find your own. When I folded the letter and sent it, my hands did not tremble. Weeks passed. No reply came. And strangely, that silence did not wound me. It freed me. For the first time since Ethan's birth, my sense of peace, my breath, my worth did not orbit around him. I no longer waited for his calls, his apologies, his scraps of affection. My life had expanded beyond the prison walls that held him. I had Gabriella. I had Nancy. I had the women who gathered in my kitchen, their laughter rising like music. I had scholarships bearing my name, helping children who carried dreams the way Ethan once had. I had flowers outside my window, blooming despite everything. Whether Ethan ever changed was no longer my burden. The thread binding us had been cut in that courtroom. The letter was not a knot tying us together again. It was a farewell disguised as hope. And I accepted that. Because closure, I learned, is not the return of those who betrayed you. It is the decision to stop waiting for them. I am 65 now. I sit in the garden of my small cottage, the morning sun gilding the roses Nancy planted for me, the air alive with bees. My hands are busy with soil, but my mind drifts often to the road I have walked, the graves I have passed through, the fires I have survived. Sometimes people ask if I regret what I did. If faking my death was too much, too theatrical, too cruel. I answer them the same way every time. They chose murder for money. I chose survival with proof. They wrote my death certificate before I ever touched the stairs. All I did was sign it for them, and then step back to watch. The truth is, I did not K*LL my family. They K*led themselves, piece by piece, with every greedy laugh, every cold calculation, every mocking word. All I did was hold up a mirror, and let the world see. What I learned is simple. Family is not blood. Family is loyalty. Blood may bind you, but it can also bleed you dry. Loyalty is what holds you upright when everything else crumbles. My son valued an insurance policy above me, but the world gave me something better. Sisters who were strangers, daughters not of my womb but of my heart. Grandchildren who visit my garden not for inheritance but for cookies and laughter. When my story spread through television, through books, through whispers on buses, I began receiving letters. Women from Kansas, from Madrid, from villages I had never heard of. They told me they were finally saying no, that they stopped bankrolling ungrateful sons, stopped signing away houses to parasitic daughters-in-law, stopped mistaking exploitation for love. Some told me they changed their wills. Some told me they filed charges. Some simply said, "You gave me courage." And that, more than the verdict, more than the prison sentences, felt like justice. Because truth punishes deeper than bars. My family wears their crimes on their names forever. Their masks fell live on television. Their reputations shredded not by gossip, but by their own voices. They will never again be just Ethan the lawyer, Brooke the socialite, Mark the accountant, Diane the housewife. They will always be conspirators, betrayers, vultures caught mid-feast. I became, unexpectedly, a voice. Not a saint, not a martyr, but a witness. My story no longer belongs just to me. It belongs to every person who has felt the knife twist from the hands of their own kin. At night, when the garden cools and the crickets sing, I sit with Gabriella and Nancy. We talk not of betrayal, but of recipes, of books, of the small sweetness of survival. We have learned that laughter can return, that the air can be light again, even after years of suffocation. But the scar remains. It must. Scars are not weaknesses. They are proof that we lived. So here I am, Helen Parker, 65, alive after my own death. I died once, yes. But in that death, I began to live. And if my story has found you, if you are reading these words, listening to my voice, then I ask you, from which city are you hearing me? From which corner of the world do my words reach you? Because family is not the name on your birth certificate. Family is the one who answers when you speak. Family is the one who stands beside you when everyone else sharpens their knives. And maybe, just maybe, this story will give you the strength to stop mistaking betrayal for love. Because once masks fall, there is no putting them back on. And when the truth blooms, it blooms forever.